Excellent. I think I have successfully launched the talk, so I will allow everyone to get settled in, get their configuration in place, make sure you can hear me, make sure you can see my slides, and we'll get going in another minute or so. And just a little housekeeping while we wait, actually. Um, I like to keep these things kind of intimate. And so if there's any questions anywhere along the way, um, I'm not rehearsed like a robot, so I'm happy to take any questions. I feel like the dialogue and discourse leads to the best outcomes. So just wanted to throw that out there. Again, if you're just joining us, we are waiting a little while until everyone gets settled in, and then we're going to get going here. Okay, perfect. So we're going to get going. My name is Brian Martinovich. I am the solutions architect principal for Login VSI, and today I'm going to be speaking about the overlapping of security and advancing initiatives within security of large enterprise, and also keeping in mind our employee experience. First off, I'll start by going into a little bit of detail about myself. I'm sure most of you on this call don't know me. And so my background is in information technology. From as long as I can remember, I wanted to put technology in front of me and find out how it ticked and how to fix it. And so been across the spectrum in information technology, from help desk all the way up to running solutions architecting for Login VSI. From my experience in IT. So I've seen a lot of different scenarios. And prior to this, I came from a consultancy background. So managed services providing, root cause analysis for highly complex IT issues. And in the last 7 years, it's been more specialized specifically in the EUC space, if you would, end user experience management. So I've talked to customers with hundreds of thousands of employees down to customers with several hundred, running the gamut, all at different levels of maturity in their IT practice. So I've seen a lot of configurations, and therefore I can talk to you guys confidently about security and user experience. So let's talk about cybersecurity specifically. And I figured that it helped to first cover cybersecurity governance according to the way that Microsoft views the world. And they have this little pyramid here. At the top of it, you talk about the business goals and correspondingly the risks that those businesses are willing to take, all the way down to, once those decisions have been made, compliancy and reporting. So ongoing, accurate, and accountable business practices from a security standpoint. And so along the left and the right, I just kind of pulled out some topics and how it relates specifically to what I'm going to be talking about today, and that's end user experience. And so basically at the business goals and risk level, you're looking at, critical translation from business requirements. So what does your business need, and how can you do it by leveraging technology? And then when you know that, you can also make a decision about what risks the business can afford to take, because let's be honest, you'll never be 100%. So what level of investment are you willing to make is corresponding to the risk that you're willing to take. Most organizations have a rollout of about 75 days for major changes. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of moving parts there, especially at large organizations. There's a lot of risk involved in making security adjustments, patches, updates, and changes to the software and hardware stack. And I just called out a day because a day count, because again, this is translating what you're capable of doing from a business technology perspective. Then you also have IT service management and the request for change process. And I really pulled some dashboards to show visually how you can make quick decisions and therefore accelerate the adoption of cybersecurity while keeping an eye on your end user experience. And in the end, organizations will demand visibility into this process. And also, in order for a company to be successful, there needs to be closer relationships between teams. So how do teams in their siloed roles communicate with each other effectively and efficiently? And then also ensuring that you're reporting on the policies that you enacted, because if you make decisions and you don't follow up on them, that's considered from a business perspective to be negligent. And so you wouldn't want to find yourself in that situation. So really, what it boils down to is like, how do we drive cybersecurity initiatives forward? How do we make our environments more secure while also enabling our users to do the jobs that they need to do? And really what it boils down to is a few different things. And I highlighted 2 levels of the stack, and obviously cybersecurity intersects these in more areas than just the areas that I highlighted here, which is identity and security, but really Windows security patches and modifications to your golden images, your hypervisor. You get hardware level breaches like Spectre and Meltdown several years ago. You're going to be updating those GPUs, or is that change that you're making, is that going to potentially increase your attack surface? So, realistically, any security modification or improvement should be considered successful based upon your user's ability to still do their job, right? And still do their job in the rate and speed that they did it before. And then also, knowing what the outcome will be after you make that change. You have to make that change, and you can't reasonably make that change unless you know what the result will be after that change is made. And so that's a big and major concern, right, that you have to account for. Can you shrink the attack surface by consolidating technologies or limiting where things are hosted in order to decrease your chance of having a breach? And also, are the security measures that you're making and putting in place, will they create a gray market? Because, if you lock down your file security to such a degree and your users can no longer get their job done, then they might start using Dropbox, for example, which is not what you want to happen. And so it's a careful balancing act here to make sure all of this works in concert with each other. Just checking to see if we've gotten any questions, and not yet, so that's fine. So we'll dive right back in here. So what I propose, and what Login proposes as a solution to this this challenge that businesses have, is the utilization of a virtual user. And I'm not sitting here and telling you that Login is the be all end all, and there are not other approaches, to this challenge that businesses have. But this is simply the way in which we approach this specific challenge. And so, a few areas that the virtual user has an advantage over traditional agent-based approaches, for example, is that you're able to make security exclusions for it. This virtual user can live and exist in the context where your real users do, and can give you insight about what happens after that change is made, right? That virtual user has the ability to report on what its experience is like after that change, and therefore enables you to make intelligent decisions about the risk that you will take. One of the other things is identity management is a critical portion of the technology stack. And you can have disparate solutions to check, identity management, application performance, underlying software and hardware that support those systems by monitoring it. But if you're not testing identity management as part of an overall security practice, you're exposing yourself to a level of risk, because basically if that identity management stops functioning as a result of a change that you make, or it slows down and no one's testing it, then you basically have a front door that's locked and your users can't get to their systems. A simplification of network architecture. So, again, you want to shrink attack surface wherever possible, and we can communicate over a single or a centralized port, which is 443. So most typical networks have HTTPS enabled within their environments. There's no restrictions from a firewalling or switching standpoint. And so you can take a virtual user and insert it into your networking architecture to gain insight into what your users are experiencing. Production images aren't impacted. Any changes that you're making inside of images that you're delivering to users, that every agent that you have, if it's a user profile management solution, it's an antivirus solution, it's a network optimization to the protocols that are on the networks, any modification that you're making into that configuration will have an impact in and of itself. And so if you're not using an agent, you have the ability to remove that as part of the equation. Then one of the other aspects of it is checking to make sure things aren't working that are still not supposed to work. So maybe you make a change to some proxy settings and some websites that users were not supposed to be able to access, or some redirects that you expected to take place were no longer taking place. And so, now you're using a virtual user to understand the how the security context affects the real users. So I figured that at this stage it was probably beneficial to talk about some actual customer stories, and obviously without using any names, but I find that customer stories are the best way of relating concepts to real life. And so we had a very large healthcare practice in the United States that during the pandemic needed to go to a completely remote model in order to continue to serve their constituents, right? And so the solution provider that they settled on was Microsoft, and they decided to use or leverage Azure for their end users. So that's all well and good, and it's pretty out of the box to test that kind of thing. The only wrinkle realistically occurred here was that they were using a multi-factor solution in front of it, and in this instance, they were actually using Microsoft's 365 Authenticator. And what we were able to do was attach the virtual user to a Google-based one-time password authentication token process as part of the test parameter. And we could actually log the virtual user into Azure Virtual Desktop and test and see availability, scaling and capacity on that solution before they certified it for their users. And so, in my estimations, that's touching on multi-factor. And realistically, a lot of people are going to virtual desktops in the cloud as a means of security. So that's one way in which you can accelerate your process by involving virtual user testing, multi-factor authentication. We also have a large DaaS, desktop as a service provider. And the interesting thing about them is that they don't necessarily specify the way in which their users get to the desktops that they provide for them. And so the way in which they're doing that is they have Citrix environments, they have Horizon environments, they have Azure Virtual Desktop environments, and some of those customers of theirs have requirements for a multi-factor authentication solution. So in order to ensure that that is still working as part of their design process, they have a virtual user that's actually interacting and exchanging that Okta token, plugging it into a variable field value to enable that as part of the testing parameters. And so again, in order to accelerate your cybersecurity posture and ensure that you're not experiencing breaches, you need to test those type of things. always find that visualizations are one thing, but also seeing something is another. And so I actually have a video here of multi-factor authentication enabled testing of a user's parameter. And in this instance, it's a Horizon environment that is leveraging Duo. So Duo has a few different ways of doing this. You can do a password token value, which a lot of you are probably used to. You can also receive a notification on your phone that requests whether or not you approve or deny. And that coupled with multi-factor or with usernames and passwords is the way in which users utilize and leverage these systems. So I have a brief video here, which I'll kind of narrate for you as it goes along here. So what you're seeing on your screen right now is one of our launcher components. Our launcher component facilitates our virtual user technology logging into an environment, and access and identity management is an important part of security posturing. We're running our launcher software. Our launcher software is actually firing up the Horizon client, and in this instance, our end user is utilizing VMware Horizon as their gateway into. And I know this was probably kind of hard to see, but there was a pop-up notification that happened on that emulated Android device there that actually asked whether or not the user would allow or deny the logon attempt. So we actually had a macro set up on that Android emulator that approves that whenever it gets the message. And so we can scale test this environment. We can check it for performance and availability. And again, from a security change process standpoint, you can't make these changes into the environment to make it secure unless you're considering all aspects of it. And so, we've demonstrated how we can check not only performance, but also accessibility through systems that are enabling MFA here. So the other aspect of it is software that you leverage to secure these environments, like antivirus solutions. So, when in creating this presentation, I went out there and I did a little bit of homework to find out what some of the most popular antivirus solutions were in enterprises. And come to find out, it's Bitdefender, Symantec, which is now owned by Broadcom, and whether or not they'll change it to Broadcom endpoint protection, I'm sure it's yet to be determined, but nonetheless. And probably Windows Defender as it ships with Microsoft products, and it's pretty reliable. So one of the beautiful things about using a virtual user to accelerate your security practices when you're applying updates to your environment, whether that's on physical machines that your users are accessing or a virtualized environment like the one that I had just showed you through Horizon, you can actually leave your security software on. And so when I say that, I mean, what you could do is make an exclusion on the particular binaries necessary to drive the interactions within the work session. And a lot of times these solutions will either have an exception based upon where those files are located, or, and my personal favorite is an exclusion based on a certificate. So each file is still scanned, but if it identifies that a security certificate is applied to sign that binary, it'll allow that software to do what's necessary within the session. So some of the benefits here of leveraging a virtual user and your ability to execute changes within a security software perspective is that you can leave it enabled. And so now you have that virtual user that's going through, or that even manual users in certain cases with the technology turned on, able to validate function and workflow as part of the test parameter. Again, mitigating potential impact to end user experience as a result of changes that you're making whenever vulnerabilities are discovered. The other benefit of it is that you can actually determine the necessary overhead of what it would be required to run this in production before you push it out. So you can summon an army of virtual users to this testing configuration and determine whether your interaction times within those workflows are either broken. So, we made a change to the endpoint protection software, and the users are no longer able to use an add-on or perform workflow interactions between applications as a result of the change that you've made. And in fact, I've actually seen where the overhead added from a change to solutions like endpoint protection here drastically changed the amount of components necessary to support the number of virtual users that, or real users rather, that were previously supported. And if you can do that, then you can understand what that necessary overhead is, if there is some, to properly budget and account for what it costs to manage that software as a life cycle. I'm going to pause real quick to just check for questions here. No more questions yet. So the other thing is, you're making changes on your at your networking level as well. You're making updates. Say you have Meraki systems and firewalls dispersed geographically for users that are connecting inside of your environment, inside of your data centers, or external to it. You need to be able to check that. You need to be able to see if the changes that you're making to your security posturing are affecting your users' ability to access these environments or access them in the rates that they had anticipated. So, for us, for example, we simplified our solution to enable you to run our components inside or outside of your environment, because realistically, in a new work from home world, users want to access your systems securely from external, and they should be able to at an experience rate that they're used to. And so by simplifying our port configuration, we can deploy our launcher component geographically alongside your users to understand how changes you're making to your networking layer are affecting your end users' ability to access their systems and perform their work and workflow in rates that they had anticipated. So I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, but I did plan on leaving about 5 minutes at the end for a Q&A session. But when I was making this presentation and practicing it with one of my colleagues, he really asked me, what is the outcome that you are looking to drive with this discussion? And really what the outcome is, and what I want to share with you are a few conclusions, right? If you're not checking modifications that you're making at an identity provider level, if it's not part of your test parameter, you're exposing yourself to a potential risk here, right? What if you make a change and now all of a sudden your users can't access the systems? That's not a brownout. That is a blackout at that stage. Users are unable to access their systems at all. That's a huge black eye on the organization. So you need to be including identity provider as part of your testing parameters to ensure that your security posturing is not affecting your ability to access these systems. You need to understand how many resources are necessary to support your users as well. We have a solutions architect on our staff here now who came from a large-scale financial institution. And the light bulb moment for him was asking the question of how many users can we actually support with our configuration? And no one had a very clear answer on it. And come to find out, after they started breaking down what they needed for each component and looking at security posturing, that was a large amount of their resource expenditure that they didn't really realize or account for. And so therefore, a significant portion of their budget for their hardware requirement was now tied up because of their security posture. One of the main things that holds security modifications up is the ability to determine what the result will be after an update has been applied. If you don't have the ability to quickly quantify that impact and you're waiting for people to test systems out, you're observing the impact on your real user base, that takes a lot of time. And so we've seen customers that mature this process go from months down to hours in certain circumstances for changes that are made because they have automated testing processes in place. It's good to invest in solutions here from an end user experience perspective that don't add additional overhead, because basically who's going to watch the watcher at the end of the day? If your management interface for end user experience and performance is providing a level of overhead, you may be accounting for that in production when you don't have to. So you basically want to limit what's running all of the time. And then also, like, you need solutions that don't disarm or counteract your security posturing as part of your testing parameter, because you don't want to be exposed to what happens if those particular portions are occupying a disproportionate amount of resources to support a user base. And obviously that problem scales as an organization gets larger. So with that being said, I have around 2 minutes right now, right up against my 30-minute mark. And I just wanted to say thank you. So anyone who sat here through the entirety of my 30-minute rant about security posturing and improving end user experience, I want to say thank you. Thank you for dedicating your time. Time is the most important resource that we have. And I certainly appreciate you spending some time with me here today. That being said, I'm not the only presentation, the last presentation of the day. I know we have plenty of other sessions going on after mine. So make sure you guys stay tuned. Any questions that you have left for me, I will follow up with you after the chat. So thank you very much. Until next time. Oh, there are questions and I still have time. Oh boy, there are a lot of questions. That's not good. So I am going to actually have to come back to some of you on these questions. My apologies. They kind of came in here real quick towards the end. I'll try to go through them. And let's see. Could I use it on my virtual services like Citrix AVD and VMware? Yes, absolutely. The only thing is we can't violate any laws of physics. So if I'm doing a retinal scan to get into these systems, or if I have to show a thumbprint or whatever, that's only the scenario in which I would not be able to help out. Traditional VPNs and zero trust where 2FA is required. Yeah, so you can actually establish a VPN connection from the launcher and have it to wherever the environment is that you're connecting. So that shouldn't be a problem. Oh, we still have 2 minutes left. How many times a day can I test and validate that my services are up? All day long. Well, ideally, any solution that you're looking at, you want to be running these tests on an on-demand basis, but you also want to be running them continually against production and pre-production. What type of infrastructure is required for testing external access? What type of data can you collect with your virtual user from a security posturing standpoint? I think that question will probably take longer than we have. I'll try to answer it very superficially, but the requirements from an infrastructure standpoint are very minimum. We find some of our customers even run virtual machines in their cloud provider of their choosing, about 2 vCPU and 4 gigs of RAM, to allow you to have about 30 concurrent user sessions. What type of data can you collect from a security posturing and positioning standpoint? It all depends upon how you write your test cases. Some profiles could only be set up to tech asset access to certain gateways. Some could just be set up to test 2FA. Some could just be set up to test whether or not someone can access something, or geographically dispersed. And you're going to look at, like, latency experience, the ability to log in, what kind of identity management solution you have along the way, and so on and so forth. Does this mean I could test and proactively monitor mimicking my users from remote access services, authenticating 2FA with Login Enterprise? Yes, absolutely. But again, that being said, we can't violate the laws of physics. So no biometrics as of yet, although maybe, I kind of joke about Arduino driven server. What do they call them? But anyway, yeah, no laws of physics can be broken. Well, that's it, everyone. If there are any more questions, I'll follow up afterwards. Enjoy the rest of your day.